the date is the 15th of September.
Yeah.
Richard Ryan, 15th September 2014. I'm at the U.S. Nationals at Ottawa, Illinois, and basically going to do background of, I guess, how I started jumping. And I started out jumping, I guess it started way back before I started. I went to my hometown airport with my dad, my uncle, and my cousins, and we watched the Golden Knights do a demo. And it was back probably about 63, 64, somewhere along in there. And anyhow, one of the guys on the Golden Knights asked me if I wanted to stand in the saddle and hold tension for him. And I asked him, I said, man, that's cool. I said, that's awesome. How do you do that? And he says, you join the Army, you volunteer for jump school, you join a skydiving club, whatever base you go to, and when you get enough jumps, you apply for the Golden Knights. And so basically, my junior year in high school, I dropped out of school, I joined the Army, I volunteered for jump school, and while I was at jump school, I got selected to go to rigger school to learn pack parachutes, which is a kind of a neat story there too. But anyhow, went to rigger school, and then I went to my first rigging unit at Fort Campbell, and my first sergeant didn't really care for me, so he sent me to Fort Stewart thinking he was sending me over to Vietnam, but actually I went down there to inspect parachutes for the fixed wing aviation school, and down there's where I learned to jump at Fort Stewart, Georgia, back in 1966. And so the people down there were really awesome. They took me under the wing. I made my first jump on the 3rd of July, for free fall, 3rd of July, 1966. And a little place called Barnwell, South Carolina. And I jumped off. My first jump was real glamorous. The guy didn't lock the wheel on the brake, and I stepped out, and I bounced my reserve off of the wheel, and next thing I know, my chute opened, and I was okay. But anyhow, I made about 20, 30 jumps there. Then I volunteered, re-enlisted to go to France, and I went to France, and I went to sit out with the advanced party to go to Germany. So when I got to Germany, I joined the 8th Division Parachute Club and started jumping over there. And that was a real experience, because the club was tied real close to the 7th Army Parachute Team, and so I got to know a lot of the guys over there. And anyhow, I wound up leaving there and going to Vietnam, and went from Vietnam back to Fort Bragg, which is where I had probably one of my scariest experiences in jumping, and because I hadn't jumped in a long time, and I'd only made a few 5-second delays, and then 6 or 8 months I've been back from Vietnam. And anyhow, Gene Paul Thacker, they'd signed me off to jump without my automatic opening device on reserve, because they had a shortage of them with the club, and I had 50-some jumps, 54 jumps, I think. And anyhow, he took me up, and they took me up. I was supposed to get out after student, and the next thing I know, I'm at 7,500 feet. And I went out and I got in a flat spin, and I fought it. I got in a flat spin, and I fought it. I got in a flat spin, and I fought it. Next thing, I fired my chute up. I got the canopy open, I got line stretch, and I landed. That's it. There was no canopy time. The guys on the ground said that were on the SALT landing strip were looking towards the packing zone. The drop zone dropped off towards main base. It sort of dropped off downhill. If that hadn't been on a hill, we wouldn't be having this conversation, because it went off into a valley. And like I said, they said when I went past the packing zone, I was still in free fall, and they didn't see no canopy or nothing. And so anyhow, if anybody could document that for me, to help, so I could apply for the record of the lowest possible opening in the history of parachuting. But anyhow, I thought sure I was grounded, and Gene Paul told me, he said, no, you ain't grounded, because you'll never make that mistake again, I guarantee you. I mean, and I got to know Gene Paul real good over the years, because he as I got involved in skydiving with the skydiving clubs and being an area safety officer, I went to a couple conference championships and stuff and helped judge and help work at the sectional, regional, in the Midwest. And anyhow, I got to know Gene Paul, not well, but enough that we knew each other and got along pretty good. And so anyhow, then I come down north and went back to Germany. When I went back to Germany, I got a job working for the 8th Division Sport Parachute Club, because the guy that was running it had gone in. He was on the 7th Army team, and anyhow, his chute hadn't opened properly, and he landed on asphalt and really binged himself up good. And anyhow, he was in bad shape, so they assigned me to help him and be his assistant manager, which for a year and a half I did that, and then I got put on the 7th Army team doing exhibition jumps and demos and stuff with him. But Carl Miller is probably the biggest. If anybody needs to have an award named after him after what he went through and as focused as he was on training students and creating safe training programs for students, Carl Miller was probably, he's an ex-Golden Knight, and he's probably one of the biggest influences on me in all my years of jumping. But after I left 8th Division, I went back to Fort Campbell, and I was active in the Fort Campbell Club from 71 to 73. I was pretty active. My big jump there was I skydived into the Talladega 500 down at Talladega, and I got my jump signed off by Richard Petty, of all people. Got to sit in his car and all kinds of neat stuff. We skydived into the infield. Got to watch the whole race, which all you see from there is the tops of numbers on top of the car for the whole race. But anyhow, while I was on probably the neatest jump I ever made while I was on the 7th Army team was we jumped at Wasserkuppe, Germany, and our NCOIC quoted a military regulation to us that there are exceptions to certain rules in the USPA regulations for military jumpers, and he was exercising this, and he told us, he says, it's totally voluntary. We didn't have to jump if we didn't want to, but we couldn't get the altitude to make what would be considered a legal jump. But the show, as they say, the show must go on, and we had the president of West Germany down there. We had Neil Armstrong. We had all kinds of VIPs from all over Europe for this. It was right after the moon landings. And anyhow, we got out at about 1,400 feet. That's when we exited the aircraft, about 140 knots, 1,400 feet. And we did the show, went on. We did the show. Nobody backed out. Everybody did the show. So that was probably my most memorable to me, those two jumps. And so anyhow, but then I went back over and ran the 8th Division Club at Mannheim. The first one was a club at Bad Kreuznach. That's where I was on the 7th Army team at, but when I went down to Mannheim, we started a club down there, and I was involved with that club for a year and a half. And then that was pretty much my end of my jumping career over there. But when I wanted to get high jumps over there, I would go down to Strasbourg, France, and skydive with the French. And that's one thing I really appreciated. I learned an appreciation for the FAI, for the respect for licenses of one country to another, because they respected our U.S. licenses, even though our standards weren't as high as theirs. And I felt bad when I went down there because they had students down there making static lines, and they had more jumps than I did. Because of the French, if you weren't exactly perfecto, you weren't getting on free fall. And so, anyhow, but that was awesome. Go down there and skydive at Strasbourg, France. There's a lot of Canadians went down there to jump. They were stationed over there in Europe, and anyhow, it's a neat place to go. They had a bunkhouse. Skydiving in France is subsidized by the government, and you pay lift tickets like you do here in the States now. So it's a lot of it. They had it set up over there years ago. So, but yeah, I got out of jumping in I got out of the Army in 1978. In 1979, I made my last free fall. I went down to jumping in Rolla, Missouri. My best friend, I taught him to skydive jumping off the back of the car, and taught him to skydive, and he got his C license and everything, and he got out of the Army. He went down there and started a drop zone in Rolla, Missouri, and he knew I was getting out of the Army, so he asked me to go down there and join him and run the skydiving club. And I jumped. He said, "I got 2 chutes." He says, "They're already packed. We can just go jump." And so he had a T10 and a 5TU. You know, I didn't want to jump T10. You know, I probably needed to, but I didn't want to. And he says, "Well, I've seen you jump TUs before." He says, "No problem." He says, "I know you can jump TUs." I said, "Yeah, I can jump TUs." So I said, "I'll jump it." But the problem was Murphy got involved because I didn't unpack the chute and repack it. And if I had, I wouldn't have jumped it because it was cut clear up to the apex almost. The panels were cut out almost to the apex. And while I jumped TUs, but they were only when they were cut about 4 or 5 feet up. If they were cut high like that, I couldn't jump them because I weighed too much. So anyhow, when I landed under that canopy, I mean, it was like a freight train. And it's taken me all these years for my back to get better to where I feel like I can get back into skydiving. So the course of events, anyhow, with my military experience and getting my Agent Orange settlement from the government, I've got money now and I've got time to kill. And my wife always said, "Well, you got kids." Well, the kids are all raised. So now my goal now is to get back and get my gold wings. And then after I started looking at that, I said, if I just do another 120 jumps past that, I could probably get my 12-hour free fall badge. So anyhow, that was my goal. Now that's my I guess you could say my bucket list to get I got 3 things on my bucket list: to get my gold wings, get my 12-hour free fall badge, and make a parachute jump in each one of the 50 states. So that's my bucket list for skydiving. So, and I've got about 10 of the states, which I did back when I was jumping. I already had 10 or 11 of the states already, so I want to try to, if I start jumping again, I'm going to start pursuing it, but first I got to lose a ton of weight. So anyhow, that's where I'm at with that. But I really enjoyed coming up here and meeting all these people. I went down to Zephyr Hills for about 2.5, 3 weeks this winter, and that's how I found out I could jump, because I'd lost my CDL, and so I assumed that terminated my chances of jumping. And I'd lost 90 pounds back then, 10 years ago, to start jumping, and that's when I had my heart attack. But when I went down to Zephyr Hills, I met a bunch of Canadian guys who said, "No, that's not a problem." They said, "You can jump with one of those, with a defibrillator." So I said, "Okay, I'll try anything. I want to jump." And so so here I am. My goal now that I got this money is to every year go around 3 or 4 months out of the year, or 5 months out of the year, just go from drop zone to drop zone, state to state. And next summer I want to take a tour out west to go up through Montana, Idaho, Washington, Oregon, all those states out there, and get a jump in every one of those states. You know, the 2 hard ones, of course, would be hard, Alaska and Hawaii, but you put your mind to it, you'd do anything. So that's my goal. I used to drive all 48 in my truck every year, and I've driven almost every mile of the interstate system, except for about 100, 120 miles, wherever there's a piece that goes off to the state line, you know, like from the main interstate, like 90, there's a piece going up the Canadian border, and there's a piece here going up, or a piece going to the Mexican border. I have driven, I'm proud of it, I have driven every mile of the United States interstate highway system. over the 20 years I drove a truck. But that was a personal goal. I had an atlas that I was crossing them off on. I'd take a load just to go cross off another piece of highway. But anyhow, so I guess I'm a bucket list type guy. So yeah, I guess that's all I got to go on it.